Looking at Kamisha and Kayla's online engagement, they were always supportive, encouraging, calling each other sisters.
Social media gives us a window into the lives of those we admire most.
They was always together, happy, encouraging each other, smiling.
But what happens when someone looking in becomes enraged?
That flowery, kind language took a sharp turn.
Everybody gets jealous in their own ways.
Digital envy spills over into reality.
Both girls were heated, and both girls were mad.
I just had a gut feeling that something bad was going to happen.
And ends in tragedy.
I feel like the betrayal was out of this world, and I feel like the betrayal cut deep.
Kamisha was my oldest sister. She started the 5. We call each other like the 5 heartbeats. We always like laughing. Every time I see her, it's just a bunch of joy. Smile just brighten up the world and everything. She could make you laugh. Yeah, it was just nothing but love.
She had a laugh that even if you heard her laugh, you would laugh.
It was a shift in her. There was a change. Her energy was different. She probably felt overwhelmed, but she didn't know how to express it.
If you could say one thing directly to Kamisha now, what would it be?
I would say, I wish I was there. For the moments that she felt like she was alone, or the moments where she just couldn't have the courage to tell us what was going on or what was happening.
Kamisha was born July 19th, 1988. I was 16 at the time. I was a young mother. We were residing in Brooklyn, New York. I had her at Kings County Hospital. She light-skinned, vibrant, beautiful baby. Head full of hair, just pretty, just like the prettiest baby I ever seen. And I was just excited and enthused that I had her. And next thing you know, I had 5 children. Misha was basically a mini-me.
I feel like Kamisha was more of a second mom to me, because whenever my mom wasn't home, she had to fill in her shoes.
She was always on top of us, always made sure that, everything was straight, our homework.
As an older sibling, you had to watch your younger siblings. And if you wanted to go to the park, if you wanted to go outside, take along your brother and your sister.
When Kamisha was in elementary school, her family moved to Cypress Hills in East New York, which is where she first met Kayla Enriquez.
Our mothers know each other. Our grandmothers know each other.
Kamisha and Kayla known each other for a very long time. Everybody grew up together.
4 years younger than Kamisha, Kayla Enriquez had a difficult childhood alongside her sister and brother.
Their mother passed away young.
It was 3 of them, and, Kamisha was tight with both sisters. And they, she was there. She was there for them.
Ramel was Kayla's big brother, and he was a childhood friend of Kamisha who would later become her boyfriend.
It's like that first time love thing. Because, Ramel was a pretty boy in the projects. She loved that man. She loved him wholeheartedly.
So Kayla, because my sister was dating her brother, she always was an extension of family.
Over the years, Kamisha and Kayla shared dreams of building a great life. And in 2006, Kamisha makes a giant stride when she graduates from high school and is accepted to college at the John Jay School of Criminal Justice.
She is a go-getter. She was smart. She was about her business, a boss, and very outspoken.
She had beautiful teeth. She had beautiful smile, beautiful hair.
I wanted her to be a model because she just had that look and she just had that pizzazz about her. But she was like, no, I'm going to be a lawyer. She said she wanted to help other people. She wanted to right some wrongs within people. I was proud of Kamisha. Very proud of her.
Kayla really admired Kamisha a lot. She thought that she was smart and beautiful and had everything going for her.
And then one day, Kayla confided in Kamisha, hey, I'm pregnant. I don't really know what to do. And she was considering not staying in school. And Kamisha said, you know what? I'm going to be there for you. I want you to stay in school, and I'm going to support you. Kayla lost her own mother as a child, so Kamisha felt obligated to help Kayla because she viewed her as a little sister and she wanted her to succeed.
Ramel and Kamisha was trying to push her to finish high school and be on the right path.
She took Kayla to appointments, and whenever Kayla needed money, she was there for her.
In April of 2010, Kayla gives birth to a healthy baby boy named Alex.
Kamisha was there. She loved that baby. It's like she loved his mother.
She had a baby. She was still a baby herself, honestly. Yeah, so Kayla needed the help. She didn't really have much to, buy Pampers, get milk and stuff.
Kamisha financially provided for her when she needed help.
Just 1 month after the birth of Kayla's son, Kamisha becomes the first person in her family to graduate from college.
She graduated there, and then she went on to take her LSATs for law school. She had that enthusiasm. She's gonna get where she needs to get, and she's gonna be somebody.
During this time, Kamisha had a lot on her plate. She was a security guard at JP Morgan Chase, and she also worked as a housekeeper. She was basically putting herself through school, but making enough money through her second job to also help support Kayla and her child.
She just wanted to be somewhat of a guide for Kayla. She just wanted to help and be there for her.
Kamisha would help with Alex and encourage her to stay in school and to go to school and to finish.
She'll give her money. She'll help her out with the baby. Honestly, I feel like it was a good friendship.
Did you ever witness tensions between Kamisha and Kayla?
Yes. It doesn't make sense to me at all. It just doesn't make sense.
At 10:30 p.m., 911 dispatchers receive a frantic call from Kayla Enriquez's apartment complex.
It was one of Kayla's friends saying, come right away, a woman's been stabbed, we need assistance.
But who was stabbed and who was responsible? And what happened between these lifelong best friends that could have led to this tragedy? Police in Brooklyn's East New York neighborhood have just received a 911 call about a stabbing at the apartment complex of 18-year-old Kayla Enriquez.
I was working February 28th, 2011, and I received a notification to respond to a female stabbed. It was around 10:30 in the evening. When I arrived, I saw an ambulance parked in front of. Inside the ambulance was a female that was given first aid.
When police arrived to the scene, they learned that 22-year-old Kamisha Richards was stabbed in the altercation. While she's conscious, she's critically wounded.
She had a serious injury, and they had to get her to the hospital immediately.
Kamisha is rushed to Brookdale Hospital, while police make their way to the apartment where the altercation had occurred.
Kayla had several friends in the house that day.
We learned that Kayla Enriquez and Kamisha Richards were friends, and that Kamisha Richards was dating Kayla's brother, Ramel.
So Kamisha was going there because Kayla was living with Kamisha's boyfriend because they were brother and sister.
According to her friends, Kayla knew Kamisha was coming over to continue a feud they had been having over social media earlier in the day.
I see the argument stemming over Facebook, and I text Kamisha, and I said, what's going on? If something she felt like wasn't right, she will go head to head with you. And I knew she would win the battle.
Detectives learned that the young women's friendship had recently fractured, and resentment had been growing between them.
Kamisha seemed to always give her money if she needed money, if it was for the baby. And during this specific time, she had asked her for $20 to buy, I believe, diapers and formula.
Kamisha wasn't happy because the money she was giving Kayla to help take care of her son and provide necessities such as diapers and milk, they were being used for other things for Kayla. And apparently this altercation spilled from online to in person.
Both girls were heated and both girls were mad. The fact that it was on a public platform where other people could see just escalated it.
That night, I felt like it was just gonna be a fight anyway, because once they seen each other in person, one of them was gonna speak up and ask, like, okay, what do you mean by that?
Where we're from, a fight is not that uncommon, is common practice.
Kamisha came to her place about 10 p.m. She started yelling at Kayla. Kamisha goes to the refrigerator, takes the formula out, and pours it across the kitchen floor and said, now we're even.
And Kayla took this as like a great offense. Like, if you want to do something to me, do something to me, but why would you in some way hurt my baby and throw out my baby's formula or milk?
According to Kayla's friends, after Kamisha poured the baby's formula on the kitchen floor, both Kamisha and Kayla took the altercation into the bedroom.
Kayla said, let's go into this room. It's only going to be me and you.
Shortly after, Kayla's friends say they saw Kayla leave the bedroom, go to the kitchen, grab a knife, and then run back into the bedroom. Shortly after, they saw Kamisha stumble out of the bedroom.
Kamisha yelled out, "This just stabbed me."
At that point, Kayla panicked and she was like, really upset because she couldn't believe that she actually, stabbed someone.
She then fled the apartment.
After speaking with witnesses, an APB goes out for Kayla Enriquez, while detectives scour the apartment for evidence.
When the victim was stabbed, she was stabbed one time in the heart, and the handle of the knife broke off. Then the blade remained in the victim. In the apartment, there was a handle to a knife in the kitchen sink. It was broken from a steak knife. When I was in the kitchen of the apartment, I also noticed a baby bottle and some formula that was on the floor.
Detectives follow a trail of blood droplets through the apartment building and out onto the street.
We saw that there was some blood in front of the building. Emergency service unit was notified to bring a bloodhound. The bloodhound tracked that blood trail to an apartment. A woman answered the door, and she pointed towards the bathroom. As I went into the bathroom, I pulled the shower curtain, and Kayla Enriquez was inside the tub behind the shower curtain.
She immediately started saying that she was defending herself and she did nothing wrong.
These arrests don't usually happen this quick. Usually somebody gets away, we got to do an investigation, but this investigation, we placed the prime suspect in custody. So our job was just to now determine the truth about what happened.
When you found out that it was someone so close to Kamisha, what were your thoughts?
It's just a gigantic question mark. What happened? Why did it happen? And what made it happen?
In the early hours of March 1st, 2011, detectives in Brooklyn, New York have just taken 18-year-old Kayla Enriquez into custody after she stabbed her best friend, Kamisha Richards.
She's been detained and she's brought back to the 75th precinct.
When Kayla was getting ready to be interviewed, the police got the news that Kamisha was pronounced dead at 11 p.m.
It changed me. It changed my life. It stopped my life. It complicated my life. And I didn't know what to do. I only remember what people told me, how I went in and identified her. What I do remember is she had dry tears on her face. And she had that look, not of horror, she just had that sad look, like she was disappointed.
So with the case now going from assault to homicide, authorities know they need to get Kayla's side of the story immediately.
During the interviews, Kayla didn't show any emotion when she was told that Kamisha died. Kayla told me that Kamisha and her were friends and that Kamisha was like a big sister to her and that they were friendly up until this incident.
Kayla felt resentful about a lot of things. Kamisha was constantly telling her how to be an adult and how to be a mom and how to do right in school and, do this and do that.
And Kayla became confused and she couldn't understand how someone she looked up to, like a big sister, could criticize her this way.
Kayla started feeling like, who is she to tell me how to be a parent? Kayla felt that Kamisha was harassing her and she wasn't going to stand for it.
According to Kayla, Kamisha's public comments on social media that day were the final straw.
It was very clear that Kayla felt embarrassed by the fact that Kamisha had written things on Facebook, and she was kind of being punked or trolled on social media.
I think Kayla was a little afraid of Kamisha because Kamisha is older and probably stronger. So she wanted other people around to help if the situation was to get out of control. So she invited friends over to help protect her and to be a witness to whatever might occur.
Kayla said Kamisha came to her place about 10 p.m. She came into the apartment yelling, and then she took the baby's formula and just started pouring it on the ground. And at that point, she felt as if Kamisha was bringing her child into the conflict, and she became not only worried for her own safety, but for the safety of her child.
But then she asked Kamisha to go into the room away from her friends where it would be more private.
Kayla stated that Kamisha had a pair of scissors in her hand, so she went and got a knife from the kitchen.
According to Kayla, Kamisha swung the scissors at her, and in defense, Kayla swung the knife back at her, but she didn't realize she punctured her chest. She just remembers the comment that Kamisha said that this stabbed me.
I think she started to realize what she had done and the seriousness of it. After the interview was completed, I placed Kayla Henriquez under arrest for murder in the second degree and criminal possession of a weapon.
In order to verify Kayla's story, detectives begin reviewing the evidence and discover a major inconsistency.
Kayla, in her statement, had said, well, Kamisha was coming at me with scissors. Yes, there was a pair of scissors that were recovered, but that didn't make any sense. The scissors were in a location where the scissors would have been, but also Kayla left the room, went and got the kitchen knife, and then went back in. So it would have been very odd for Kamisha just to be standing still with a pair of scissors, waiting for her to return. And instead of retreating to safety, she got the weapon and ran back in.
Still, with Kayla claiming self-defense and no eyewitnesses to the actual stabbing, detectives must determine whether Kayla acted in self-defense or with premeditated intent. Two days after the stabbing that claimed the life of 22-year-old Kamisha Richards, her friends and family gather to pay tribute to her life.
We did like a candlelight in front of the building. And a whole bunch of people came out to talk about my sister.
Friends of friends came out. So this was like a huge thing to celebrate her.
So now the pressure is even more on authorities to bring the killer to justice.
Police are determined to find out what happened between Kamisha and Kayla Henriquez. Was it an act of self-defense or murder? With Kayla in custody, detectives turn to Kamisha's loved ones for further insight.
So authorities began to interview family and friends of Kamisha to figure out what went wrong between the two women. During the interviews, there was this one common thread. Kamisha went above and beyond to help Kayla, working 2 jobs, helping support her mentally, financially, and also helping provide support to her child.
And I tried to tell her multiple times, it's not your job to fix. You don't have to come in somewhere and fix something. If you love someone, that's only your job is to just go in there and love someone. It's not your job to try to fix the whole family.
When detectives inform the family of Kayla's claims, they're quick to shut the allegations down.
Kamisha's family adamantly denies that Kamisha would intentionally try to hurt Kayla. Everything that Kamisha did for Kayla, they said it was out of love and support of her.
She loaned Kayla $20 to buy diapers for her son, Alex, and she realized that Kayla actually used the money for herself.
My sister felt like Kayla was taking advantage of her kindness.
Kamisha's heart was in the right place, and she felt betrayed. She felt used.
And I think she felt like this was enough and that she was tired of being taken advantage of by Kayla. So they texted back and forth. An argument ensued over Facebook and over texting.
I texted her and I said, what's going on? And she explained to me what was going on. And I said, well, is it about the money? Or she said, no, it's a principle.
So authorities subpoenaed Kayla's social media as well as her phone records.
While detectives wait for the phone records, they dig through Kayla and Kamisha's digital lives.
Kamisha had said, like, I want my money back. I don't care that it's only $20. You're not going to just take advantage of me. I've given you money in the past, and now you are buying stuff for yourself. When I gave you money for your son, I want it back.
When people fight on social media, it does cause shame and hurt, and all kinds of emotions come into play because the whole world has access to it. So it's not like it's a private argument between two people.
But it was more so about the fact that Kamisha was calling Kayla out on social media and that people were then commenting on their fight on Facebook.
At one point, you had Kamisha saying online, like, this is the last time you're going to con me. And then Kayla was like, oh, you're trying to call me out on Facebook.
And Kamisha had said to her, well, I'll have the last laugh. And Kayla had said, well, we will see.
So do you think that the message she gave Kamisha on Facebook was pretty much her way of saying that she was thinking of doing something bad to Kamisha?
I feel like she was thinking something bad. I feel like she, with that message, like, confirmed it. It sealed the deal. Well, you don't just argue with somebody on social media and the next thing you know, you just take an object and just plunge it straight through her heart. It seems pretty much planned out to me. You knew what you was doing.
Detectives decide it's time to talk to the one person who knew both Kamisha and Kayla better than anyone, and contact Ramel Enriquez for questioning.
Kamisha Richards was dating Kayla's brother, Ramel. And he was distraught, he was upset.
And as detectives will learn, what seemed like an escalating feud on social media had been growing from the depths of a spiraling young woman.
At certain points, Ramel didn't even want Kamisha associating with his sister. He didn't want it.
After arresting 18-year-old Kayla Enriquez for the murder of her friend, Kamisha Richards, detectives are talking to Kayla's brother and Kamisha's boyfriend, Ramel.
He was put in a position where his girlfriend is murdered by his sister. That's difficult. That's hard for anybody to have to deal with that, because where's his loyalty?
Talking with authorities, Ramel said that one thing that he loved about Kamisha was that she had a good head on her shoulders, and while she liked to have a good time, she always put her academics first.
My sister wasn't no slouch. She was always the gem in the family.
Ramel shared that Kamisha had a bright future ahead of her, and he admired how she wanted the same for his little sister, Kayla. Kayla idolized Kamisha. Kamisha was successful, she was beautiful, she was smart, she had a lot of things going for her, and Kayla felt like it was really hard to reach Kamisha's level.
Kayla also continually fell in with the wrong crowd.
Kayla didn't really come from anything. She didn't really have no guidance because she wanted to run the streets like her friends. She wanted to, be in the projects and think it was cool to do what everybody else was doing.
Despite it all, they continued to help her, but they did get frustrated because they were trying to put her on the same path as Kamisha. However, Kayla wanted to go her own way. The constant pressure for Kayla to live up to Kamisha started to build on Kayla. The two girls were so close and constantly being compared.
When you're growing up in the projects, you don't really have much going for yourself, and then you see the pretty girl walking around, She has 2 jobs. She's going to college. She's graduating. That will really set someone back and, have them discouraged.
It wasn't long before Kayla's obsessive nature became evident, and Kamisha began distancing herself from Kayla, which appeared to send Kayla over the edge.
Kayla increasingly grew jealous of Kamisha. Kamisha was the life of the party. She was able to go out. She was able to hang out anytime she wanted to, whereas Kayla was stuck at home with Alex. She constantly saw her friend on Facebook, lived the life that she wanted to live.
The more Kayla missed out on, the angrier and more frustrated she became with Kamisha. In her eyes, it wasn't fair that she had it all while Kayla struggled to keep her head above water.
It appeared that she probably looked up to Kamisha, but was still probably very jealous of the person that she was. Here was Kamisha was the first person from her family to graduate college. She was going on to law school, and Kayla was a teen mom.
When the argument began over the $20 loan, it was essentially the last straw for Kayla.
In Kayla's head that night, there was going to be a fight because she felt as though Kamisha was trying to embarrass her on social media when they had the back and forth.
She felt like Kamisha had everything, she didn't have anything.
Detectives theorize it was that unhinged jealousy that drove Kayla to do the unthinkable.
So in Kayla's eyes, Kamisha had to go.
When detectives receive Kayla's phone records, her intentions become clearer.
After authorities went through Kayla's phone records, their suspicions were confirmed. It wasn't as if Kayla was the victim of Kamisha just confronting her. Kayla had every intention to fight Kamisha, and she brought backup.
From reading the text messages back and forth from both individuals, the story that Kayla gave about self-defense, it wasn't justified.
In New York, in order to have a justification defense, or what we call commonly self-defense, you have to be in imminent fear that you're going to be killed at that moment. So the fact that she had left the room, went into the kitchen, got a kitchen knife, and then went back to where Kamisha was, would have refuted the self-defense claim. I think textbook black letter law, when you raise a knife and you plunge it into somebody's heart, you intend to kill them at that moment that you are doing it. We decided she was going to stand trial for murder in the second degree, which carries a life sentence.
But right before Kayla is set to go on trial, her attorney meets with the prosecution about a plea deal.
I think that she didn't want to risk going to trial because if she was found guilty of murder, she would have been in jail and the end sentence is life.
What would have been like justice for you? Like what kind of sentence for Kayla?
The DA, she was very hands-on, but the timing and the rush with the case at the end, then it wasn't right. But being the state that I was in at the given moment, I just wanted things to be over because I just couldn't deal with it. I couldn't deal with reality at that time.
More than 2 years after the murder of her best friend, Kamisha Richards, Kayla Enriquez has approached prosecutors about a possible plea deal for a lesser sentence.
So she could have gotten 15 to life, 20 to life, 25 to life. The Brooklyn DA's office will not offer a plea without the victim's family's input and unless they're in agreement.
I couldn't deal with reality at that time. I had 2 breakdowns. So to just make things go faster, I just told them, yeah, give it a 15 years.
Kayla takes a plea deal in exchange for not being charged with murder in the second degree.
We decided to offer her a plea of manslaughter in the first degree. But when Kayla actually pled guilty, she had to abandon that claim of self-defense. So she pled guilty to intentionally trying to cause her serious physical injury and causing her death, and it was not justified. So she had to say that it was not justified, and that Kamisha did not attempt to hurt her or kill her with a pair of scissors.
On August 21st, 2013, Kayla was formally sentenced and sent to prison for 15 years.
Like, being that she got only 15 years, it made me feel terrible. Life would have been the right sentence for her. Life. Thinking back, if I had to do it all over again, she should have gotten 25 to life. Because you took someone that cared about you, you took someone that loved you, and you took someone that really wanted the best for you and your child. And that night, you not only ended her life, but you ended your life.
I didn't feel like my sister was getting any justice for what happened to her. And I was angry.
Kayla grew up without a mom, and now you're going to take her and put her in jail for 15 years. Her son is, in essence, not growing up without a mom. And 15 years, by no stretch of the imagination, is a short amount of time.
On January 3rd of 2024, Kayla Enriquez was released from prison after serving 11 years of a 15-year sentence.
Do you ever want an apology from her? At least hear the reason of why she did it?
Hell no. Hell no. I believe in an eye for an eye. But I believe in God. And I believe that regardless of her time served, he's not done with her yet. And it's not up to me to say what justice she'll receive or what punishment she shall receive.
I hope the years that she did spend in prison, she was able to reflect and think about what she did and how it affected a lot of people and why she did what she did to the point where she can be honest in what she did. Am I hoping for an apology from Kayla? Honestly, it would be nice. But I'm not hoping for it.
It's not fair. And every single time you get close to people and you just love them, you love on them and you love on them and you love on them, and somebody takes them. It's not fair.
I know my children feels betrayed. I know my children feel cheated out of having a big sister taken away from them.
Kamisha was there for you. She stood by you. She treated you like a little sister. Like, she treated you like you was one of us, one of her own siblings. So I feel like the betrayal was out of this world, and I feel like the betrayal cut deep.
We keep Kamisha alive through conversation and through pictures. We have plenty of pictures. And between all of us, we have plenty of stories.
I see Kamisha in every one of us, me and my siblings. I definitely see her in me because I don't give up with anything that I do. And that's just who she was. She was not a person to give up on anything.
Right now, Kamisha probably would have had her own practice. And she would have just been a top-notch attorney. She was heading in the right direction.
I think that she would be proud of me that I went back to school and I got my degrees. Yeah, when I got my associates, that was strictly for her. And then I went and I said, I'm going to get my bachelor's. Kamisha gave me that.
Kamisha was a role model. She was a motivator. She was a boss, a go-getter. She stood her ground.
I'm peaceful, I'm calm, and I know one day I'll see her again. I'm certain of that. But until then, I just have to keep living life one day at a time. I keep her alive as much as I can. I will never let her go.
The first clue wasn't a fingerprint. It wasn't a witness. It wasn't a confession whispered in a dim interrogation room or a weapon abandoned in the shadows. It was something so small that no detective in 1987 could truly understand its future value. Invisible traces left behind by a man who believed he had erased himself forever. For more than 3 decades, that silent evidence waited in darkness while families mourned, investigators retired, and one of the Pacific Northwest's most haunting cold cases became a mystery that refused to die. Somewhere, a killer woke up every morning believing he had escaped justice. Somewhere, he built an ordinary life while 2 families lived inside an endless nightmare. Then science caught up with memory. November 1987 arrived in the Pacific Northwest wrapped in cold rain and heavy skies. The forests stretching between British Columbia and Washington state seemed endless, a maze of towering evergreens, winding highways, and isolated roads disappearing into silence. It was the kind of landscape that looked peaceful from a distance, but could swallow a person without leaving a trace. Thousands crossed the international border every week without incident. For most travelers, it was simply another drive through breathtaking scenery. For 2 young people deeply in love, it was supposed to be the beginning of a future they had carefully planned together. Jay Cook was 20 years old.
Tanja van Kuilenborg was 18.
Friends described them as responsible, kind, and inseparable. They were not thrill-seekers chasing danger. They were ordinary young adults trying to build a life together. They dreamed about marriage. They talked about work, family, and the years waiting ahead. Their plans were refreshingly simple, and perhaps that made what happened next even more unbearable. Their journey began in Victoria, British Columbia. The couple had agreed to deliver a furnace part to Jay's father in Seattle. It sounded like the kind of favor countless families ask every day. They would travel by ferry, drive south through Washington, complete the delivery, and return home. Nothing about the trip appeared unusual. No one imagined it would become the last time many would ever see them alive. On the morning they left, they packed lightly. There was no sense of urgency. No feeling that danger was waiting beyond the next highway exit. Loved ones expected them back within days. Instead, time slowly transformed concern into panic. When Jay and Tanya failed to return, relatives began making phone calls. Friends checked familiar places. Employers asked questions. Every passing hour made less sense than the one before it. Responsible young adults do not simply disappear without contacting someone. Not in the middle of a planned trip. Not while borrowing a family vehicle. Not without leaving behind every expectation they had carefully created. At first, authorities treated the situation as a missing persons case. There was still hope. Maybe the couple had experienced mechanical trouble. Maybe they had decided to extend their visit unexpectedly. Maybe there had been some misunderstanding at the border. Investigators followed the usual possibilities because the alternatives were too horrifying to accept. Days later, hope suffered its first devastating blow. Near the small community of Bellingham, Washington, a couple walking through an area near the roadside noticed something abandoned among the brush. It was a maroon Ford van. The vehicle belonged to Jay Cook. It had not broken down. It had not crashed. It had simply been left behind. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Where were Jay and Tanya? Why abandon the only transportation they had? Why were there no obvious signs explaining their disappearance? Detectives examined the van carefully. Every object became important. Every fingerprint mattered. Every unexplained detail hinted at a story no one could yet piece together. The vehicle looked less like the scene of an accident and more like the opening chapter of a crime whose ending remained hidden. Inside, investigators found clues suggesting the couple had never willingly walked away. Their belongings painted an unsettling picture. Personal items remained where they should not have been if someone had simply chosen to disappear. There was no logical explanation connecting the abandoned van to the complete absence of its occupants. The search intensified. Police officers, volunteers, and worried family members scanned forests, fields, rivers, and roadsides. Helicopters surveyed remote terrain. Every anonymous tip sparked another search. Every rumor briefly revived fading optimism before collapsing under scrutiny. Yet Jay and Tanya remained missing. Then the investigation took an even darker turn. 5 days after the van was discovered, hunters entered a wooded area near Monroe, Washington. The location was quiet, isolated, and surrounded by dense vegetation. It was not somewhere a person would accidentally stumble upon. Hidden among the trees lay the body of a young woman. She was identified as Tanya Van Queilenborg. The scene stunned investigators. She had been sexually assaulted. She had been shot in the back of the head. She had been left where nature might eventually erase the evidence. The brutality shocked even experienced detectives. This was not a crime committed in panic. It was calculated, personal, and ruthless. Whoever killed Tanya had gone to considerable effort to leave her isolated from discovery. The news shattered both families. Parents who had spent days praying for a miracle were suddenly forced to confront unimaginable reality. Friends who expected joyful reunions now gathered in grief. Yet, even amid overwhelming sorrow, one agonizing question remained unanswered. Where was Jay? Detectives believed the answers to Tanya's murder almost certainly depended on finding him. If he had survived, he might identify the attacker. If he had not, his location could reveal the sequence of events that transformed an ordinary delivery trip into a double homicide. The search continued with renewed urgency. Every mile of highway connecting Bellingham, Seattle, and the surrounding counties became a potential crime scene. Officers retraced the couple's likely route. Gas stations were contacted. Motels were questioned. Businesses reviewed receipts and customer records. Border officials reconstructed crossing information. Detectives hoped some overlooked detail might expose the moment everything went wrong. Instead, another grim discovery awaited. Nearly 2 weeks after Tanya's body was found, workers near Snohomish uncovered human remains in a ditch beside a rural road. It was Jay Cook. Unlike Tanya, Jay had not been shot. He had been beaten. He had been strangled with a ligature. His hands had been bound. The violence told investigators something chilling. The killer had controlled both victims for an extended period. This was not a spontaneous robbery gone wrong. It was a prolonged ordeal involving restraint, movement between locations, and repeated acts of violence. Now detectives faced one of the most disturbing crime scenes Washington state had seen in years. 2 young victims. Multiple locations.
Kidnapping.
Sexual assault. Execution-style murder. No eyewitnesses. No clear suspect. No obvious motive. The timeline became increasingly complex. Investigators concluded the couple had likely encountered someone shortly after entering Washington. Somewhere along their route, they crossed paths with an individual capable of extraordinary cruelty. Whether they stopped voluntarily or were forced into submission remained uncertain. But once they lost control of the situation, they never regained it. Evidence suggested Tanya had remained alive for some time after the initial abduction. Jay also appeared to have been kept alive before eventually being murdered elsewhere. The separation of the crime scenes indicated careful movement by the offender, someone comfortable navigating the region without attracting attention. Detectives interviewed everyone remotely connected to the victims. Family members, co-workers, friends, former classmates, neighbors. No one identified enemies. No one described dangerous associations. No one believed Jay or Tanya were involved in drugs, organized crime, or high-risk behavior. The investigation kept returning to one unavoidable conclusion. This appeared to be a random encounter. Random crimes create a unique kind of terror. They destroy the comforting belief that danger can be avoided through caution or good judgment. Jay and Tanya had done everything society tells young people to do. They worked hard. They stayed close to family. They planned for the future. Yet somewhere along an ordinary highway, they vanished into the hands of a predator no one even knew existed. News coverage spread rapidly across both Canada and the United States. Headlines warned travelers. Parents feared for their children. Communities near the border locked doors earlier than usual. Every unfamiliar face suddenly seemed suspicious. Rumors multiplied faster than facts. Some believed multiple offenders were involved. Others suspected organized criminals. A few imagined a serial killer roaming the Pacific Northwest. Investigators refused to speculate publicly, but privately they understood the immense pressure surrounding the case. Every day without an arrest weakened public confidence, while increasing fear that the offender might strike again. Forensic science in 1987 offered only limited answers. Detectives carefully collected biological evidence from Tanya's body. They preserved fibers. They documented tire impressions. They photographed every inch of the scenes. Experienced investigators sensed that certain pieces of evidence might become important someday, even if existing technology could not yet unlock their secrets. Those decisions would prove extraordinary. Without realizing it, crime scene technicians were preserving the future. Back then, DNA profiling was still in its infancy. The revolutionary techniques that would one day identify killers from microscopic traces barely existed in practical criminal investigations. Detectives relied heavily on eyewitness testimony, confessions, fingerprints, and conventional forensic comparisons. If the unknown attacker had no criminal record and left no identifiable prints, the trail could disappear almost completely. And that was exactly what happened. Months passed. Hundreds of interviews became thousands. Leads arrived from across North America. Each promising tip dissolved into disappointment. Potential suspects were questioned, eliminated, and replaced by new names that ultimately led nowhere. The investigation expanded, but the truth seemed to retreat further into darkness. The case file grew heavier. The answers never came. Somewhere beyond those forests and highways, a man carried on with his life, while two graves reminded everyone else that justice had stopped moving. The discovery of Jay Cook and Tanya Van Queilenborg in separate locations immediately transformed the investigation from a missing persons case into a complex homicide inquiry spanning multiple jurisdictions. Detectives in Washington state worked alongside the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, comparing timelines, interviewing witnesses on both sides of the border, and reconstructing the couple's final known movements. Every confirmed detail became significant because there were so few of them. Investigators established that the couple had crossed from Victoria, British Columbia, into Washington on November 18, 1987. Their intended destination was the Seattle area, where they planned to deliver a furnace part to Jay's father. The route was familiar and well-traveled. Nothing suggested they expected danger or had altered their plans. The abandoned van became one of the earliest focal points of the investigation. Crime scene specialists documented the vehicle extensively, searching for fingerprints, trace evidence, and signs of a struggle. Although forensic technology in the late 1980s was far less advanced than it is today, investigators recognized the importance of preserving every piece of physical evidence. Biological samples, fibers, and other trace materials were carefully collected and stored according to the standards of the time. Interviews expanded rapidly. Detectives spoke with relatives, friends, co-workers, ferry personnel, border officials, and anyone who might have encountered the couple during their journey. Businesses along the likely route were contacted in an effort to establish a more precise timeline. Despite these efforts, no witness could definitively identify the moment when the couple encountered the person responsible. Without eyewitnesses or an obvious suspect, investigators examined multiple possibilities. They considered whether the crime had been opportunistic, whether more than one offender had been involved, and whether similar crimes in the region might reveal a pattern. Each theory required careful evaluation, but none produced evidence strong enough to identify a perpetrator. The forensic examination established several important facts. Tanya had been sexually assaulted, making biological evidence particularly significant. Although DNA profiling was still an emerging discipline in criminal investigations, detectives understood that preserving such evidence could prove valuable as scientific methods improved. That decision would become one of the most consequential aspects of the case. As months turned into years, hundreds of leads were assessed. Individuals reported suspicious encounters, possible sightings, and names of people they believed deserved scrutiny. Detectives followed these leads methodically, eliminating suspects when the evidence failed to support their involvement. The volume of information reflected sustained public interest, but quantity did not translate into a breakthrough. The investigation eventually became one of Washington state's most enduring cold cases. Rather than closing the file, agencies continued to review the evidence periodically as forensic science evolved. Each advancement in DNA analysis raised the possibility that evidence collected in 1987 might reveal information that had previously been impossible to obtain. For the victims' families, the passage of time brought no resolution. Anniversaries, birthdays, and holidays served as reminders that the person responsible had never been identified. Even as investigators changed and new detectives inherited the case, the central objective remained unchanged: determine who abducted, assaulted, and killed Jay Cook and Tanya Van Queilenborg, and assemble evidence capable of meeting the standard required for prosecution. By the early 21st century, DNA technology had advanced dramatically. Biological samples that once yielded little information could now generate profiles of increasing quality. Investigators revisited evidence collected decades earlier, recognizing that techniques unavailable in 1987 might finally provide new investigative leads. Those developments laid the foundation for the next major phase of the case, one that would rely not only on forensic science, but also on an emerging investigative approach that had begun solving cold cases across the United States. Time became both the investigation's greatest obstacle and, ultimately, one of its greatest allies. As months turned into years, the case of Jay Cook and Tanya Van Queilenborg joined the growing ranks of unsolved homicides that investigators refer to as cold cases, not because interest disappears, but because every immediate lead has been exhausted. The files remain open, the evidence remains preserved, and detectives continue searching for the one development capable of changing everything. By the early 1990s, investigators had completed thousands of hours of work. Witnesses had been interviewed and re-interviewed. Potential suspects had been identified, scrutinized, and, where the evidence permitted, eliminated. Physical evidence had been cataloged with exceptional care. Yet the central question remained unanswered: who had abducted the young couple during what should have been an ordinary trip through Washington state? The absence of a suspect did not mean the absence of evidence. Detectives believed that the offender had left behind physical traces, particularly biological evidence recovered during the forensic examination. The challenge was technological rather than investigative. DNA profiling was still developing rapidly, and techniques that later became routine either did not exist or required far larger samples than investigators possessed. Rather than abandoning the case, law enforcement agencies adopted a strategy familiar to many long-term investigations: preserve everything. Evidence was stored under controlled conditions, documented carefully, and periodically reviewed as forensic science advanced. Each improvement in laboratory methods raised a simple but important question: could today's technology reveal something that yesterday's could not? Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, DNA analysis underwent remarkable progress. Laboratories became capable of generating more complete profiles from increasingly small or degraded biological samples. These advances transformed countless criminal investigations, linking offenders to crimes committed years or even decades earlier. Detectives assigned to the Cook Van Queilenborg case closely followed these developments, recognizing that their own evidence might eventually benefit from the same scientific progress. At the same time, investigators continued pursuing conventional leads. Information from the public never stopped arriving entirely. Occasionally, someone would report a suspicious individual or recall a conversation from years earlier. Every credible lead was assessed, despite the passage of time. Cold case investigators understand that memories fade, but they also know that people sometimes become willing to speak after many years for reasons that did not exist during the original investigation. The case also remained significant because of its complexity. It involved multiple crime scenes, victims from Canada, offenses committed in the United States, and cooperation among several agencies. Maintaining continuity across decades required meticulous record-keeping. Detectives who inherited the investigation depended heavily on the detailed reports prepared by those who had worked the case years before. Those records preserved not only evidence, but also investigative reasoning, allowing new teams to understand why certain conclusions had been reached and why particular suspects had been excluded. By the second decade of the 21st century, another development began reshaping homicide investigations across North America: investigative genetic genealogy. Unlike traditional DNA database searches, which compare crime scene profiles against known offenders in law enforcement databases, genetic genealogy uses publicly available family history data, subject to applicable legal and privacy restrictions, to identify individuals who may be biologically related to the unknown contributor of crime scene DNA. Investigators then construct family trees and narrow the possibilities through conventional investigative methods. The approach attracted national attention after helping solve several long-unsolved violent crimes. It demonstrated that even when an offender had never been arrested or convicted, distant relatives who had voluntarily submitted DNA for genealogical research could provide investigative leads. Importantly, genealogy alone does not establish guilt. It functions as an investigative tool that must be supported by independent evidence before charges can be pursued. Recognizing the potential of this emerging technique, investigators revisited the preserved biological evidence in the Cook Van Queilenborg case. Advances in laboratory science made it possible to generate a DNA profile suitable for genealogical analysis. Specialists worked to ensure that the testing met scientific standards and that the resulting information could be integrated into a broader investigation. The genealogical search did not produce an immediate answer. Instead, it generated possible family connections that required extensive historical research. Genealogists and investigators examined birth records, marriage records, census information, and other publicly available documents to reconstruct family relationships. Branch by branch, generation by generation, the number of potential individuals narrowed. As the investigation progressed, detectives identified a person whose background and location during the relevant period warranted closer examination. At that stage, however, investigators still required independent evidence. Standard investigative procedures followed, including surveillance and the lawful collection of additional DNA for comparison. When laboratory analysis confirmed that the newly obtained DNA matched the profile recovered from evidence collected in 1987, investigators reached a milestone that had remained elusive for more than 3 decades. Scientific advances had accomplished what years of conventional investigation alone had not been able to achieve. They identified a suspect supported by forensic evidence. The breakthrough underscored an important lesson for modern criminal investigations. Evidence that cannot answer questions today may still answer them tomorrow. The careful preservation of forensic material, combined with evolving scientific methods, has transformed the prospects of many cold cases once believed impossible to solve. For the families of Jay Cook and Tanya Van Queilenborg, the development did not erase decades of loss. No arrest can restore the years that had passed or undo the profound impact of the crimes. Nevertheless, the identification of a suspect represented a significant step toward accountability and demonstrated the enduring value of persistence in criminal investigations. As the case moved from investigation toward prosecution, attention shifted from identifying the offender to presenting evidence capable of withstanding judicial scrutiny. The years ahead would test not only the strength of the forensic evidence, but also the legal framework surrounding emerging investigative techniques, ensuring that one of the Pacific Northwest's longest-running homicide investigations would continue to shape discussions about science, evidence, and justice. The identification of a suspect marked a turning point, but it did not mark the end of the investigation. In cases built on evidence preserved for decades, investigators know that an arrest is only the beginning of another demanding process. Every conclusion must withstand rigorous examination. Every piece of evidence must be traced back through an unbroken chain of custody. Every scientific procedure must be documented in detail. A case that has remained unsolved for more than 30 years is expected to face equally careful scrutiny in court. Detectives revisited the original case files with renewed urgency. Reports written in 1987 were compared with modern forensic findings. Crime scene photographs were examined alongside laboratory analyses that had not been possible when the evidence was first collected. Investigators sought to determine not only who was responsible, but also whether the reconstructed sequence of events was consistent with both the physical evidence and the historical record. The prosecution's case relied on the principle that no single piece of evidence should stand alone. DNA evidence provided a powerful investigative link, but prosecutors also considered the broader context: the locations where the victims were found, the movement of the vehicle, the timeline established through witness statements, and the consistency of forensic findings collected decades apart. Together, these elements formed a narrative supported by independently verifiable facts rather than speculation. The use of investigative genetic genealogy also attracted significant attention. By the time the case reached court, the technique had already contributed to the resolution of several long unsolved crimes. Even so, investigators emphasized that genealogy itself did not determine guilt. It served only to generate an investigative lead. The evidentiary foundation rested on DNA comparisons conducted under established forensic standards and on evidence admitted through the judicial process. As legal proceedings advanced, the case drew renewed public interest in both the United States and Canada. For many people, the names Jay Cook and Tanya Van Queilenborg had become synonymous with one of the Pacific Northwest's most enduring cold cases. News organizations revisited the original investigation, interviewing retired detectives, forensic experts, and members of the victims' families. The story became an example of how scientific progress can reshape investigations long after they appear to have reached a dead end. The renewed attention also highlighted the dedication of multiple generations of investigators. Detectives who had begun the case in the late 1980s had long since retired. Others who inherited the investigation spent years reviewing thousands of pages of reports, preserving evidence, and following developments in forensic science. The eventual breakthrough was not the result of a single discovery, but of decades of methodical work carried forward from one investigative team to the next. For the victims' families, the court proceedings represented a difficult return to events they had lived with for more than 3 decades. Every hearing revisited memories that had never completely faded. Yet the proceedings also offered something that had long seemed uncertain: the opportunity for the evidence to be examined publicly and for the justice system to evaluate responsibility based on the facts presented. The case has since become a frequently cited example in discussions of cold case investigations. It illustrates the importance of preserving forensic evidence, maintaining comprehensive investigative records, and periodically reviewing unsolved cases as technology evolves. It also demonstrates that the passage of time does not necessarily weaken every investigation. In some instances, advances in science can reveal information that was simply beyond the reach of earlier generations. Although no legal outcome can undo the loss experienced by Jay Cook and Tanya Van Queilenborg's families, the investigation underscored a broader principle that continues to influence modern policing. Evidence carefully collected today may answer questions many years from now. In that sense, the case stands as both a reminder of a profound tragedy and an example of how persistence, meticulous documentation, and scientific innovation can eventually illuminate even the longest-running mysteries. The conclusion of the legal proceedings did not erase the significance of the investigation. Instead, it prompted law enforcement agencies, forensic scientists, and legal scholars to examine why this case had remained unsolved for so long and what ultimately made the difference. The answer was not a single technological breakthrough, nor a single detective's determination. It was the convergence of meticulous evidence preservation, scientific innovation, and decades of sustained investigative effort. In 1987, the investigators who processed the crime scenes could not have anticipated the capabilities that forensic laboratories would possess more than 30 years later. Nevertheless, they treated the physical evidence with exceptional care. Biological samples were collected, documented, and preserved according to the best practices of the time. That decision proved critical. Had the evidence been contaminated, discarded, or improperly stored, later scientific advances would have had little value. The case is now frequently discussed in forensic training as an illustration of the importance of long-term evidence management. Cold cases are often thought of as investigations that have stalled, but in practice they remain active repositories of information. As analytical methods improve, evidence that once appeared inconclusive can acquire entirely new significance. The Cook van Queilenborg investigation demonstrated that principle with unusual clarity. Another lasting impact of the case concerns cooperation across jurisdictions. The crimes involved victims from Canada and offenses committed in the United States, requiring coordination between multiple agencies over many years. Maintaining investigative continuity across national boundaries demanded consistent communication, careful record-keeping, and a shared commitment to pursuing the case despite the passage of time. The investigation also became an important example of how investigative genetic genealogy should be understood. Public attention often focuses on genealogy as though it alone identifies offenders. In reality, it serves as an investigative lead rather than proof. Once potential family connections are identified, detectives must corroborate those leads using established investigative methods, and any forensic comparisons introduced in court must satisfy applicable legal and scientific standards. The case reinforced this distinction and contributed to broader discussions about both the promise and the responsibilities associated with emerging forensic technologies. For the families of Jay Cook and Tanya van Queilenborg, the passage of more than 3 decades meant that many milestones occurred in the absence of the two young people whose futures had been abruptly taken away. Birthdays, anniversaries, and family gatherings continued, but always with an awareness of the loss. While the criminal justice process eventually provided answers regarding responsibility, it could not restore the years that had been lost or the opportunities that never came to pass. The broader public response reflected another reality of cold case investigations. They rarely fade entirely from memory. Cases involving unexplained disappearances, prolonged investigations, and significant forensic breakthroughs often become reference points for future investigators and researchers. They encourage agencies to revisit unsolved files, reassess preserved evidence, and remain open to new scientific techniques that may not have existed when the original investigation began. The legacy of this investigation therefore extends beyond a single prosecution. It has influenced conversations about forensic science, evidence preservation, interagency cooperation, and the practical application of DNA technology in historical cases. It also serves as a reminder that the quality of an investigation is measured not only by how quickly it reaches a conclusion, but also by how carefully evidence is preserved for the future. Today, the case remains a notable example of how advances in science can reshape the administration of justice. It underscores the value of patience, rigorous investigative standards, and the continuing evolution of forensic methods. While the crimes committed against Jay Cook and Tanya van Queilenborg remain a profound tragedy, the investigation demonstrates that carefully preserved evidence can continue to speak long after witnesses' memories have faded and decades have passed. More than 3 decades after the investigation began, the case of Jay Cook and Tanya van Queilenborg continues to be studied not only because of its tragic circumstances, but because it illustrates how criminal investigations evolve over time. What began in 1987 as a conventional homicide inquiry ultimately became an example of the transition from traditional investigative methods to modern forensic science. The original detectives worked with the resources available to them. They interviewed witnesses, reconstructed travel routes, examined the abandoned vehicle, documented multiple crime scenes, and preserved physical evidence with the expectation that future developments might increase its value. Although many of the investigative techniques now considered routine were unavailable at the time, the thoroughness of the initial evidence collection ensured that later generations of investigators would still have a solid foundation on which to build. As forensic laboratories expanded their capabilities over the following decades, cold case units across North America increasingly revisited older investigations. Improvements in DNA analysis allowed laboratories to obtain usable profiles from samples that had once produced only limited results. These advances fundamentally changed the prospects of many unsolved violent crimes, encouraging agencies to re-examine evidence that had remained in storage for years. The Cook van Queilenborg investigation became one of the most widely recognized examples of this process. It demonstrated that the successful resolution of a cold case often depends less on discovering entirely new evidence than on extracting additional information from evidence that has existed since the beginning. This principle has influenced investigative strategies nationwide, leading many agencies to prioritize the systematic review of historical homicide files. The case has also contributed to broader discussions regarding the responsible use of forensic technologies. Investigative genetic genealogy, while highly effective in generating leads in certain cases, has prompted careful consideration of legal, ethical, and privacy issues. The courts, policymakers, and forensic practitioners continue to evaluate how these techniques should be applied while balancing investigative needs with individual rights. The Cook van Queilenborg case is frequently referenced within those discussions because it illustrates both the potential benefits and the importance of adhering to established legal procedures. For investigators, the case reinforced another enduring lesson: comprehensive documentation matters. Reports prepared decades earlier, evidence logs, laboratory records, and chain-of-custody documentation all became essential when the investigation resumed with new scientific tools. Without accurate records, even the most advanced forensic methods would have faced significant obstacles in supporting a successful prosecution. The investigation likewise highlighted the importance of persistence. Cold case detectives often inherit files created by previous generations of investigators. Their work requires patience, attention to detail, and a willingness to reconsider evidence in light of new information. Progress is rarely immediate, and breakthroughs often result from years of incremental review rather than sudden discoveries. This case exemplified that reality. Beyond the investigative and scientific lessons, the case continues to serve as a reminder of the lasting impact violent crime has on families and communities. Although the legal process ultimately established accountability, the emotional consequences of the crimes did not disappear with the passage of time. For relatives and friends, the loss remained a permanent part of their lives. The criminal justice system could determine responsibility, but it could not restore the future that Jay Cook and Tanya van Queilenborg had expected to share. Today, law enforcement agencies frequently cite this investigation when emphasizing the importance of preserving evidence, revisiting unsolved cases, and embracing scientifically validated forensic methods. It stands as an example of how persistence, careful investigative practice, and technological progress can work together across generations. While the tragedy itself belongs to history, the lessons derived from the investigation continue to influence how cold cases are approached, ensuring that evidence collected today may still help answer difficult questions many years into the future. As the investigation moved into the years following its resolution, the case of Jay Cook and Tanya van Queilenborg assumed a place beyond that of a single criminal prosecution. It became part of the broader history of forensic investigation, illustrating how advances in science can alter the course of cases once believed unsolvable. For investigators, prosecutors, and forensic specialists, the case offered valuable lessons about patience, evidence preservation, and the evolving relationship between technology and the criminal justice system. One of the most significant lessons concerns the importance of preserving physical evidence. When detectives processed the crime scenes in 1987, they had no way of predicting the capabilities that DNA technology would eventually provide. Nevertheless, they followed established procedures for collecting and storing biological material, documenting each item carefully and maintaining the chain of custody. Decades later, those decisions proved essential. The evidence had retained its investigative value because it had been preserved with long-term reliability in mind. The investigation also demonstrated the importance of continuity in complex criminal cases. Over more than 30 years, numerous detectives, forensic scientists, laboratory personnel, and prosecutors contributed to the inquiry. Personnel changed, agencies evolved, and investigative techniques advanced, yet the case remained active because each generation of investigators built upon the work of those who came before. Detailed reports, evidence inventories, and carefully maintained records allowed new investigators to understand previous findings without repeating years of work. Another notable aspect of the case was the growing role of multidisciplinary collaboration. Modern homicide investigations increasingly rely on expertise drawn from several fields, including forensic biology, crime scene analysis, genealogy, digital records research, and legal review. The eventual identification of a suspect reflected not one isolated discovery, but the coordinated efforts of specialists applying different disciplines to the same body of evidence. The public response to the case also reflected changing perceptions of cold case investigations. In earlier decades, many unsolved homicides were viewed as cases that had reached the limits of available investigative methods. Advances in forensic science have challenged that assumption. Agencies now routinely reassess historical evidence using newer laboratory techniques, recognizing that scientific developments may provide opportunities unavailable during the original investigation. As a result, many law enforcement organizations have expanded dedicated cold case units and established procedures for periodically reviewing unsolved files. The Cook van Queilenborg investigation is frequently referenced in discussions of investigative genetic genealogy. While the technique has demonstrated considerable value in generating investigative leads, the case also illustrates the safeguards that accompany its use. Genealogical analysis functions as a starting point rather than a conclusion. Any potential identification must be supported through independent investigation, lawfully obtained evidence, and forensic comparisons conducted under accepted scientific standards before it can become part of a criminal prosecution. Legal scholars have likewise examined the case as an example of how emerging technologies intersect with established principles of criminal procedure. As investigative methods evolve, courts continue to evaluate questions concerning admissibility, reliability, and constitutional protections. The investigation therefore contributed not only to forensic practice, but also to broader discussions regarding the responsible application of new scientific tools within the legal system. Beyond its investigative significance, the case remains a reminder of the enduring human impact of violent crime. For families, the passage of time does not diminish loss in the way investigative timelines might suggest. Decades may pass between a crime and a legal resolution, yet the absence of loved ones remains constant. Although the justice system ultimately established accountability, it could not restore the lives interrupted in 1987 or erase the years during which unanswered questions remained. Today, the investigation continues to be cited in professional training programs, forensic conferences, and academic discussions concerning cold case methodology. It demonstrates that persistence, careful evidence preservation, and responsible scientific innovation can substantially improve the prospects of resolving historical investigations. At the same time, it serves as a reminder that the pursuit of justice often depends not on a single breakthrough, but on decades of disciplined work carried forward by successive generations of investigators committed to uncovering the truth. More than 3 decades after the crimes, the investigation into the deaths of Jay Cook and Tanya van Queilenborg continues to be referenced as an example of how persistence and scientific progress can reshape the outcome of long unsolved cases. While the legal proceedings brought a measure of accountability, the broader significance of the case extends into forensic science, investigative practice, and criminal justice policy. One of the clearest lessons from the investigation is that the value of evidence can change over time. Physical evidence collected at a crime scene does not lose its importance simply because existing technology cannot fully analyze it. As laboratory methods improve, evidence preserved years earlier may provide information that was previously unattainable. This principle has encouraged law enforcement agencies to maintain unsolved case evidence under conditions that allow future testing as scientific capabilities continue to evolve. The case also illustrates the importance of institutional continuity. Major investigations often span decades, outlasting the careers of the officers who originally worked them. Maintaining comprehensive reports, preserving laboratory documentation, and ensuring an unbroken chain of custody allow future investigators to revisit evidence without compromising its integrity. In this investigation, careful documentation made it possible for successive investigative teams to understand the original findings and apply new forensic techniques within a reliable evidentiary framework. Advances in DNA analysis fundamentally altered the investigative landscape during the years the case remained unsolved. Improvements in extraction methods, amplification techniques, and profile interpretation enabled laboratories to generate increasingly informative DNA profiles from evidence that had once been considered limited. These scientific developments have transformed the way agencies approach historical homicide investigations, leading many jurisdictions to establish dedicated cold case review programs. The investigation has also become an important point of reference in discussions about investigative genetic genealogy. The technique demonstrated its value by generating investigative leads that conventional database searches could not provide. At the same time, the case reinforced an important legal principle. Genealogy serves as an investigative tool rather than direct proof of guilt. Any potential identification must be corroborated through independent investigation and supported by admissible forensic evidence before it can form the basis of criminal charges. Beyond its scientific implications, the case contributed to broader conversations about cross-jurisdictional cooperation. Because the victims were Canadian citizens and the crimes occurred in the United States, investigators from multiple agencies coordinated their efforts throughout the investigation. Effective information sharing, consistent evidence management, and long-term collaboration proved essential to maintaining the continuity of the inquiry over many years. Forensic educators frequently reference the investigation when discussing best practices in evidence preservation and cold case methodology. Students and investigators alike study how decisions made during the original crime scene examination ultimately influenced the outcome decades later. The case demonstrates that meticulous work performed at the earliest stages of an investigation may have consequences far beyond what investigators can anticipate at the time. The human dimension of the investigation remains equally significant. Families affected by violent crime often live for years without definitive answers, while unresolved cases can have lasting effects on communities. Although advances in forensic science have increased the likelihood of resolving historical investigations, the passage of time cannot reverse the personal losses experienced by those closest to the victims. This reality underscores the importance of sustained investigative commitment, even when immediate progress appears unlikely. Today, the Cook van Queilenborg investigation is regarded as a notable example of how modern forensic science can complement traditional investigative techniques. It demonstrates that successful criminal investigations depend not on technology alone, but on the careful integration of scientific analysis, thorough documentation, legal safeguards, and persistent investigative work. Together, these elements continue to shape how law enforcement agencies approach unsolved violent crimes, ensuring that evidence preserved today may still contribute to the pursuit of justice many years into the future. The legacy of the Cook van Queilenborg investigation extends beyond a single criminal case. It has become part of a broader shift in how law enforcement agencies view unsolved homicides. Cases once considered unlikely to be resolved are now periodically re-examined as forensic science, digital record analysis, and investigative methodologies continue to evolve. Rather than treating time as an insurmountable obstacle, many agencies increasingly regard it as a variable that can work in favor of an investigation when new technology becomes available. One of the most enduring lessons concerns the relationship between traditional detective work and scientific analysis. The eventual identification of a suspect did not result from technology operating in isolation. It depended upon the systematic collection of evidence at the original crime scenes, accurate documentation, secure evidence storage, laboratory testing, and extensive follow-up investigation. Each stage relied upon the integrity of the previous one. Without careful work performed in 1987, later scientific advances would have had far less practical value. The investigation also demonstrated the importance of maintaining public confidence in long-term criminal inquiries. High-profile cold cases often remain visible because families, investigators, journalists, and community members continue advocating for renewed attention. Periodic case reviews, media coverage based on verified information, and advances in forensic capabilities can generate new investigative opportunities even after many years have passed. While not every cold case reaches a resolution, continued review increases the likelihood that previously overlooked evidence or improved analytical methods may provide meaningful progress. Another important aspect of the case is its contribution to professional education. Police academies, forensic laboratories, and criminal justice programs frequently examine historical investigations to understand both successful investigative practices and the challenges posed by limited technology. The Cook van Queilenborg investigation illustrates the importance of preserving evidence, documenting investigative decisions, and remaining open to scientific developments that may fundamentally change the evidentiary value of existing material. The case further highlights the evolving role of forensic DNA within the criminal justice system. Since the late 1980s, DNA analysis has become one of the most influential investigative tools available to law enforcement. At the same time, courts have continued to emphasize that scientific evidence must be collected, analyzed, interpreted, and presented according to established legal standards. Reliability depends not only on laboratory capabilities but also on transparent procedures, validated methodologies, and careful judicial review. Cross-border cooperation also played a significant role throughout the investigation. Because the victims were Canadian citizens traveling in the United States, authorities from multiple jurisdictions shared information and coordinated investigative efforts over many years. Such collaboration illustrates the importance of communication between agencies when criminal investigations extend beyond local or national boundaries. Effective partnerships can preserve continuity even as personnel change and investigations span decades. For researchers studying cold case investigations, the case underscores the value of comprehensive record management. Reports, evidence inventories, laboratory findings, and witness interviews created during the original investigation remained essential decades later. These records enabled subsequent investigators to reassess earlier conclusions, verify investigative steps, and incorporate modern forensic findings into an established evidentiary framework without compromising accuracy. Ultimately, the investigation serves as a reminder that criminal justice is often a long-term process. While scientific innovation has expanded the ability to revisit historical evidence, successful outcomes continue to depend on disciplined investigative practices, interagency cooperation, and adherence to legal standards. The Cook van Queilenborg case remains a significant example of how those elements can converge over time, contributing not only to the resolution of a long-standing investigation but also to the continued development of modern forensic and investigative practice. As forensic science continues to advance, the investigation into the deaths of Jay Cook and Tanya van Queilenborg remains a benchmark for the study of cold case methodology. Its significance lies not only in the eventual identification of a suspect, but also in the investigative principles that made that outcome possible. The case demonstrates that successful long-term investigations require patience, meticulous evidence handling, and a willingness to reassess historical cases as new technologies emerge. One of the most important developments highlighted by this investigation is the growing integration of science into criminal investigations. While eyewitness testimony, interviews, and physical crime scene examinations remain essential, modern forensic techniques increasingly provide investigators with opportunities to revisit evidence that once appeared inconclusive. DNA analysis, improved laboratory procedures, and enhanced analytical methods have expanded the range of information that can be obtained from evidence collected decades earlier. The case also illustrates the importance of maintaining professional standards throughout every stage of an investigation. Crime scene documentation, evidence preservation, laboratory analysis, and chain of custody procedures each contribute to the reliability of later forensic findings. When evidence is handled consistently and documented thoroughly, investigators retain the ability to apply future scientific advances without undermining the evidentiary integrity of the case. Cold case investigations often require substantial institutional commitment. Agencies must allocate personnel, laboratory resources, and investigative time to cases that may have remained unresolved for many years. The Cook-Van Queilenborg investigation demonstrates that these investments can produce meaningful results, particularly when advances in forensic science create opportunities unavailable during the original inquiry. As a result, many jurisdictions have strengthened their cold case review programs and expanded collaboration between investigators and forensic laboratories. Another enduring contribution of the case is its role in discussions surrounding investigative genetic genealogy. The investigation illustrates both the potential and the limitations of the technique. Genealogical analysis can generate valuable investigative leads when traditional database searches prove unsuccessful, but those leads must be verified through independent investigation and supported by admissible forensic evidence. This distinction remains central to the responsible use of emerging investigative technologies. The investigation further reinforces the importance of interdisciplinary cooperation. Detectives, forensic scientists, laboratory specialists, prosecutors, legal advisors, and genealogical researchers each contributed expertise at different stages of the case. Modern criminal investigations increasingly depend upon this collaborative approach, recognizing that complex cases often require knowledge extending beyond any single discipline. From an educational perspective, the case continues to be examined within forensic science and criminal justice programs as an example of effective long-term evidence management. Students and practitioners study how careful investigative decisions made during the initial stages of the inquiry preserved opportunities for future scientific analysis. The investigation demonstrates that attention to detail at the outset of a case may influence outcomes many years later. The broader legacy of the investigation also extends to public confidence in the criminal justice system. While not every cold case can be resolved, successful historical investigations demonstrate that advances in science and persistent investigative effort can continue generating meaningful progress long after conventional leads have been exhausted. This understanding has encouraged agencies to reassess unsolved violent crimes rather than viewing them as permanently inactive. Today, the Cook-Van Queilenborg investigation remains a significant case study within the fields of forensic science and criminal investigation. It illustrates how disciplined evidence preservation, evolving scientific capabilities, cross-jurisdictional cooperation, and sustained investigative commitment can combine to address crimes that once appeared beyond resolution. As forensic technology continues to develop, the principles demonstrated by this investigation will likely remain relevant to future generations of investigators working to resolve other long-standing, unsolved cases. The investigation into the deaths of Jay Cook and Tanya Van Queilenborg ultimately became more than the resolution of a decades-old homicide case. It stands as a reminder that the pursuit of justice is often measured not by speed, but by persistence. Over the course of more than 30 years, investigators preserved evidence, revisited unanswered questions, adopted new scientific methods, and continued examining the case long after many might have assumed that no further progress was possible. For the criminal justice community, the investigation reinforces several enduring principles. Evidence collected at the outset of an investigation should always be preserved with future scientific developments in mind. Detailed documentation, careful chain of custody procedures, and comprehensive investigative records ensure that historical cases remain capable of benefiting from technological advances. These practices have become increasingly important as forensic science continues to evolve. The case also illustrates the importance of continuous review. Many cold case units now operate under the understanding that investigations are not static. Improvements in laboratory techniques, advances in digital record analysis, and the emergence of new investigative methodologies may all create opportunities that did not exist during the original inquiry. Periodic reassessment allows investigators to apply these developments responsibly while maintaining the evidentiary standards required by the courts. Another lasting contribution of the investigation is its role in demonstrating how traditional detective work and scientific innovation complement one another. Neither approach alone would have been sufficient. Witness interviews, crime scene documentation, evidence preservation, forensic laboratory analysis, genealogical research, and legal review each formed part of a larger investigative process. The successful integration of these disciplines reflects the increasingly collaborative nature of modern criminal investigations. The investigation has also informed discussions regarding the responsible application of investigative genetic genealogy. As the technique continues to develop, law enforcement agencies, forensic scientists, legal scholars, and policymakers have emphasized the need to balance investigative effectiveness with established legal protections and ethical considerations. The Cook van Queilenborg case remains one of several important examples demonstrating both the promise of this approach and the necessity of supporting genealogical leads through independently admissible evidence. For families affected by violent crime, the investigation serves as a reminder that unanswered questions need not remain unanswered indefinitely. Although no legal process can reverse the consequences of a homicide or restore the years that have passed, continued investigative effort may eventually provide factual clarity and legal accountability. That possibility has encouraged agencies throughout North America to continue investing in cold case investigations, recognizing that advances in science may create opportunities unavailable to previous generations of investigators. The broader influence of the case can also be seen in professional education. Police academies, forensic science programs, and criminal justice courses frequently examine historical investigations to illustrate best practices in evidence management, interdisciplinary cooperation, and long-term investigative strategy. The lessons drawn from this case continue to inform the training of investigators responsible for handling both current and future homicide investigations. As forensic science progresses, additional historical cases may benefit from technologies that have yet to be developed. The experience of the Cook van Queilenborg investigation demonstrates why preserving evidence, maintaining accurate records, and periodically reassessing unsolved investigations remain essential responsibilities for law enforcement agencies. What appears inconclusive today may become highly informative tomorrow through advances that cannot yet be predicted. More than 3 decades separated the crimes from the investigative breakthrough that ultimately reshaped the case. During that time, generations of investigators contributed to a shared objective, establishing the facts through lawful, scientifically reliable methods. Their work illustrates that justice often depends not on a single discovery, but on sustained professional commitment carried forward across many years. Today, the case continues to be recognized as a significant milestone in the history of cold case investigation. It demonstrates the enduring value of careful evidence preservation, scientific innovation, and interagency cooperation while reminding investigators that the passage of time does not necessarily diminish the possibility of resolution. The legacy of the investigation, therefore, extends beyond its specific facts, contributing lasting lessons to the practice of forensic science and criminal investigation for years to come. Although the criminal investigation eventually reached a legal conclusion, the story of J. Cook and Tanya van Queilenborg continues to resonate within the fields of forensic science and criminal justice. Rather than being remembered solely as a decades-old homicide investigation, the case has become an important reference point for investigators, prosecutors, forensic scientists, and researchers studying the evolution of modern investigative techniques. One of the most enduring lessons concerns the value of preserving evidence. Every crime scene is documented with the expectation that available technology will answer immediate questions. Yet the Cook van Queilenborg investigation demonstrates that evidence may hold information beyond the reach of contemporary science. Biological material collected in 1987 ultimately became far more informative decades later because investigators preserved it carefully and maintained a reliable chain of custody. This principle now influences evidence management policies in agencies across North America, where long-term preservation has become an essential component of homicide investigations. The case also illustrates how scientific progress has transformed the expectations surrounding cold cases. Historically, investigations that remained unsolved for many years were often viewed as unlikely to advance. Today, many agencies recognize that improvements in laboratory methods, digital records analysis, and forensic databases can significantly change the prospects of historical investigations. As a result, periodic reviews of unsolved homicides have become increasingly common, ensuring that older evidence is reconsidered as new analytical capabilities emerge. Another significant aspect of the case is the emphasis it places on collaboration. Successful investigations rarely depend upon a single individual. Detectives, crime scene specialists, laboratory scientists, prosecutors, legal advisors, and forensic genealogists each contributed expertise at different stages of the inquiry. Their combined efforts demonstrate the multidisciplinary nature of modern criminal investigations, where progress often depends upon integrating scientific knowledge with traditional investigative practice. The investigation has also encouraged continued discussion regarding investigative genetic genealogy. As the technique becomes more widely understood, legal systems continue to examine the standards governing its use. The Cook van Queilenborg case reinforces an important distinction. Genealogy can generate investigative leads, but criminal responsibility must always be established through admissible evidence evaluated under the rules of law. This distinction remains fundamental to maintaining both investigative effectiveness and public confidence in the justice system. For educators, the case has become a valuable teaching example. Universities, police academies, and forensic training programs frequently use historical investigations to demonstrate the practical application of evidence preservation, investigative documentation, and scientific reasoning. Students examining this case gain insight into how complex investigations develop over time and why decisions made during the earliest stages may influence outcomes decades later. Beyond its professional significance, the investigation reminds us that every criminal case involves real people whose lives extend far beyond the pages of investigative reports. Behind every exhibit, laboratory result, and court filing are families whose lives were permanently altered by violence. While the legal process can establish accountability, it cannot erase loss. Recognizing this human dimension remains essential to understanding why careful, objective, and persistent investigation matters. Today, the Cook van Queilenborg investigation is remembered not only for the scientific methods that ultimately advanced the case, but also for the professionalism demonstrated across generations of investigators. It stands as evidence that the pursuit of justice is often incremental, requiring patience, meticulous documentation, and a commitment to following verified evidence wherever it leads. As forensic science continues to evolve, the principles illustrated by this investigation will remain relevant to future investigators confronting the unresolved cases of tomorrow. The investigation into the deaths of Jay Cook and Tanya van Queilenborg continues to influence discussions about the future of homicide investigations. Although the case originated in 1987, many of the investigative principles it illustrates remain directly relevant today. Advances in forensic science, improved evidence management, and greater collaboration between investigative disciplines have changed how agencies approach unsolved violent crimes, but the underlying objective remains unchanged: establish the facts through reliable evidence and lawful investigative procedures. One of the most significant developments since the original investigation has been the increasing ability of forensic laboratories to analyze minute quantities of biological material. Improvements in DNA extraction, amplification, and interpretation have expanded the range of evidence that can contribute to criminal investigations. Samples that once yielded limited or inconclusive results may now provide meaningful investigative information, reinforcing the importance of preserving physical evidence regardless of current technological limitations. The case also underscores the continuing importance of comprehensive investigative documentation. Crime scene photographs, evidence inventories, witness interviews, laboratory reports, and chain of custody records formed a permanent record that allowed future investigators to understand and evaluate the work completed decades earlier. Accurate documentation not only supports future investigative review but also strengthens the integrity of any subsequent judicial proceedings by demonstrating the continuity of evidence handling over time. Modern cold case investigations increasingly combine traditional investigative methods with scientific analysis. Detectives continue to interview witnesses, review historical reports, and evaluate new information received from the public. At the same time, forensic specialists apply improved laboratory techniques to preserved evidence, while analysts examine historical records using technologies unavailable during the original investigation. This integrated approach reflects the broader evolution of criminal investigation, in which scientific advances enhance rather than replace conventional detective work. The Cook van Queilenborg investigation is also relevant to ongoing discussions concerning investigative genetic genealogy. The technique has become an important investigative resource in selected cases, particularly when conventional DNA database searches do not identify a suspect. However, professional guidance consistently emphasizes that genealogical information functions as an investigative lead. Any resulting identification must be confirmed through independently obtained evidence and evaluated according to established legal standards before criminal responsibility can be determined. Another enduring lesson concerns institutional commitment. Cold case investigations often extend across multiple decades, requiring agencies to preserve evidence, maintain records, and periodically reassess investigative opportunities. This continuity depends upon organizational practices rather than individual investigators alone. As personnel change over time, detailed documentation ensures that knowledge accumulated during the original investigation remains available to future investigative teams. Professional education has likewise benefited from the lessons provided by this case. Forensic science programs, law enforcement academies, and criminal justice courses frequently examine historical investigations to illustrate effective evidence management, interdisciplinary cooperation, and the practical application of evolving scientific methods. By studying cases that span several decades, investigators gain a greater appreciation for how investigative decisions made today may influence outcomes many years in the future. The broader significance of the investigation extends beyond forensic science. It also demonstrates the importance of maintaining public confidence in the criminal justice system through transparent investigative practices, scientifically validated methods, and adherence to legal safeguards. Advances in technology are most effective when accompanied by rigorous professional standards that ensure evidence is collected, analyzed, and presented responsibly. Today, the Cook van Queilenborg investigation remains a valuable case study within the fields of forensic science and criminal investigation. Its legacy lies not only in the eventual identification of a suspect, but also in the investigative principles it reinforces. Preserve evidence carefully. Document every investigative step thoroughly, remain open to scientific innovation, and recognize that the pursuit of justice often extends far beyond the immediate aftermath of a crime. Those principles continue to guide investigators working to resolve unsolved cases and strengthen the practice of modern criminal investigation. As forensic science continues to develop, the investigation into the deaths of Jay Cook and Tanya van Queilenborg remains relevant as a case study in the long-term evolution of criminal investigations. Its significance is not limited to the eventual identification of a suspect. It also demonstrates how investigative practices, scientific capabilities, and institutional cooperation have changed over several decades. The case illustrates that the successful resolution of complex investigations often depends upon sustained professional effort combined with advances in technology. One of the most important lessons concerns the relationship between evidence preservation and scientific innovation. Physical evidence collected during the initial investigation retained its value because it was properly documented, securely stored, and protected through an unbroken chain of custody. As laboratory techniques improved over time, investigators were able to revisit that evidence using analytical methods that had not been available when the crimes occurred. This principle has become central to modern homicide investigations, encouraging agencies to preserve evidence with future technological developments in mind. The investigation also demonstrates the importance of maintaining comprehensive records. Crime scene diagrams, forensic reports, witness interviews, laboratory documentation, and investigative notes collectively created a detailed historical record. Years later, those materials enabled new investigative teams to understand earlier findings, verify previous conclusions, and apply contemporary forensic methods without compromising the integrity of the investigation. Thorough documentation remains one of the most effective safeguards against the loss of institutional knowledge as personnel change over time. Another lasting contribution of the case is its illustration of interdisciplinary collaboration. Modern criminal investigations frequently require expertise from detectives, forensic biologists, crime scene analysts, prosecutors, legal advisors, and other specialists. The Cook van Queilenborg investigation demonstrates how coordinated efforts across multiple disciplines can strengthen both investigative accuracy and the reliability of evidence ultimately presented within the judicial process. The case has further contributed to discussions regarding the responsible use of emerging investigative technologies. As DNA analysis and investigative genetic genealogy have become more sophisticated, legal systems have emphasized the importance of balancing scientific innovation with established procedural safeguards. The investigation highlights that technological advances are most effective when accompanied by transparent methodologies, validated laboratory procedures, and judicial oversight designed to ensure fairness and reliability. Beyond its scientific and legal significance, the investigation has encouraged many law enforcement agencies to expand their approach to cold case review. Rather than viewing unresolved investigations as permanently inactive, agencies increasingly conduct periodic reassessments, recognizing that new technologies, improved analytical methods, or previously unavailable information may create opportunities for progress. This proactive approach has influenced investigative policy in numerous jurisdictions and has contributed to the resolution of other historical cases through renewed forensic examination. Educational institutions have likewise incorporated the investigation into forensic science and criminal justice curricula. Students examine the case to understand how evidence management, documentation, scientific analysis, and interagency cooperation interact throughout the life cycle of a major investigation. By studying investigations that span decades, future investigators gain practical insight into the importance of preserving investigative integrity from the earliest stages of a case. The investigation ultimately reinforces a broader principle that extends beyond this individual case. Scientific advances alone cannot resolve complex criminal investigations without disciplined investigative work, accurate documentation, and adherence to legal standards. Likewise, traditional investigative methods achieve their greatest effectiveness when supported by reliable forensic analysis. The combination of these elements has become a defining characteristic of modern homicide investigation. Today, the Cook van Queilenborg investigation continues to be referenced in professional discussions concerning forensic science, cold case methodology, and criminal justice practice. Its enduring legacy lies in demonstrating that careful evidence preservation, sustained institutional commitment, and responsible scientific innovation can collectively expand the possibilities of criminal investigation. As forensic technology continues to evolve, the investigative principles highlighted by this case will remain relevant to agencies seeking to resolve complex cases while maintaining the highest standards of accuracy, fairness, and professional accountability. The enduring significance of the Cook Van Queilenborg investigation can also be understood through its influence on modern evidence management practices. Today, law enforcement agencies routinely recognize that the evidentiary value of physical material may increase as forensic science advances. This perspective has encouraged agencies to invest in long-term storage systems, standardized documentation procedures, and periodic reviews of preserved evidence to ensure that future investigators can benefit from technologies that may not yet exist. The investigation further illustrates the importance of quality assurance within forensic laboratories. Scientific conclusions presented in criminal proceedings must be supported by validated methods, rigorous laboratory protocols, and independent review where appropriate. As forensic disciplines have matured, accreditation standards, proficiency testing, and standardized operating procedures have become increasingly important in maintaining public confidence in scientific evidence. Historical cases such as this one underscore why consistency and transparency are essential throughout the analytical process. Another notable lesson concerns the relationship between investigative persistence and technological change. Scientific innovation alone does not resolve cold cases. Investigators must continually evaluate whether new methods justify re-examining historical evidence, revisiting investigative theories, or reviewing earlier conclusions. This process requires careful judgment, as each new lead must be assessed objectively and supported by verifiable evidence before influencing investigative decisions. The case also demonstrates the value of effective communication among investigative partners. Major criminal investigations often involve local police departments, forensic laboratories, prosecutors, and, in some instances, agencies from different jurisdictions. Clear communication and coordinated case management help ensure that information is shared efficiently while preserving the integrity of the investigation. Over extended periods, such coordination becomes particularly important as personnel change and institutional knowledge must be transferred accurately to new investigative teams. Within the field of criminal justice education, the investigation continues to serve as an example of evidence-based investigative practice. Rather than emphasizing isolated breakthroughs, educators often focus on the cumulative effect of disciplined investigative work. Careful crime scene processing, accurate documentation, responsible forensic analysis, and ongoing case review collectively contribute to successful outcomes. The investigation demonstrates that these routine professional practices can become decisive many years after the original events. The case has also encouraged broader discussions about the role of innovation in policing. As technologies continue to evolve, agencies must evaluate new investigative tools carefully, ensuring that their use complies with legal requirements, scientific standards, and ethical responsibilities. Responsible implementation depends not only on technological capability, but also on appropriate oversight, training, and judicial review. The experience of historical investigations provides valuable guidance for balancing innovation with established procedural safeguards. From a policy perspective, the investigation has reinforced support for dedicated cold case initiatives. Many jurisdictions now maintain specialized units responsible for reviewing historical homicides, coordinating forensic reanalysis, and identifying cases that may benefit from emerging technologies. These programs recognize that unresolved investigations remain an important component of public safety and that advances in science may continue creating opportunities for meaningful progress. Ultimately, the Cook Van Queilenborg investigation represents more than a single historical case. It reflects the broader evolution of criminal investigation over several decades, illustrating how careful evidence preservation, interdisciplinary cooperation, scientific advancement, and sustained institutional commitment can work together within the framework of the justice system. While every investigation presents unique challenges, the principles demonstrated by this case continue to inform professional practice and contribute to ongoing improvements in forensic science and homicide investigation. Looking ahead, the lessons drawn from the Cook Van Queilenborg investigation continue to influence the future of forensic science and homicide investigation. As analytical technologies become more sophisticated, investigators are increasingly able to extract meaningful information from evidence that would once have been considered insufficient for examination. This ongoing evolution reinforces an important principle. Evidence should be preserved with the expectation that tomorrow's scientific capabilities may exceed today's limitations. One area of continued development involves the refinement of DNA analysis. Modern laboratories are able to recover and interpret genetic material from increasingly small or degraded samples while applying rigorous quality control procedures. These advances expand the range of cases that may benefit from renewed forensic examination, particularly investigations conducted before contemporary laboratory techniques became available. As methods continue to improve, agencies routinely evaluate whether historical evidence should be reanalyzed using updated scientific protocols. Digital technology has likewise transformed investigative practice. Electronic case management systems, searchable document archives, geographic information systems, and advanced analytical software allow investigators to organize and review complex case files more efficiently than was possible in previous decades. Historical reports, forensic records, and investigative notes can now be examined alongside newly developed evidence, providing a more comprehensive understanding of long-standing investigations while preserving the continuity of the official record. The investigation also illustrates the importance of institutional learning. Major criminal cases often shape future policies, training programs, and professional standards. Agencies study historical investigations to identify practices that proved effective, recognize challenges encountered during earlier inquiries, and improve procedures for evidence management, interagency coordination, and forensic review. In this way, individual cases contribute to broader improvements across the criminal justice system. Another enduring theme is the role of collaboration between scientific and investigative disciplines. Effective criminal investigations increasingly depend upon partnerships among detectives, forensic scientists, laboratory personnel, prosecutors, legal advisors, and technical specialists. Each discipline contributes distinct expertise, and successful outcomes often result from integrating these perspectives within a coordinated investigative strategy. The Cook-Van Queilenborg investigation remains an example of how multidisciplinary cooperation can strengthen both investigative accuracy and judicial reliability. The case further emphasizes the importance of maintaining public trust through transparency and professional accountability. Scientific advances are most valuable when accompanied by validated methodologies, clear documentation, independent review where appropriate, and adherence to established legal standards. These safeguards help ensure that forensic evidence remains reliable and that investigative conclusions can withstand careful examination within the judicial process. Cold case investigations continue to benefit from these evolving practices. Many law enforcement agencies now conduct systematic reviews of historical homicides, identifying cases that may warrant renewed examination based on developments in forensic science or newly available investigative resources. Such reviews recognize that unresolved cases remain active responsibilities rather than closed chapters, reflecting an ongoing commitment to pursuing reliable evidence whenever new opportunities arise. From an educational perspective, the investigation continues to inform the training of future investigators and forensic professionals. By examining cases that span multiple decades, students gain insight into the importance of meticulous documentation, evidence preservation, scientific reasoning, and procedural consistency. These foundational principles remain relevant regardless of future technological advances, serving as the framework within which new investigative methods can be applied responsibly. Ultimately, the Cook-Van Queilenborg investigation demonstrates that the pursuit of justice is strengthened by preparation for the future as much as by responses to the present. Careful evidence handling, comprehensive documentation, scientific integrity, and sustained institutional commitment create opportunities that may not become apparent for many years. As forensic science continues to evolve, these principles will remain essential to ensuring that investigations are conducted with accuracy, fairness, and respect for the rule of law. The broader legacy of the Cook Van Queilenborg investigation is reflected in how criminal justice agencies now approach the preservation of evidence and the management of long-term investigations. Cases that remain unresolved for years are no longer viewed simply as inactive files. Instead, many jurisdictions recognize them as investigations that may benefit from future scientific developments, improved analytical methods, or newly available investigative resources. This shift has encouraged agencies to maintain comprehensive evidence archives and establish formal procedures for periodically reviewing historical cases. An important aspect of this evolution is the recognition that successful investigations depend upon both scientific capability and investigative discipline. Laboratory analysis can reveal valuable information only when evidence has been collected, documented, and preserved according to established professional standards. Likewise, investigative conclusions remain strongest when supported by multiple independent sources of evidence rather than a single finding. The Cook Van Queilenborg investigation illustrates how these complementary principles contribute to the reliability of criminal investigations. The case also highlights the growing importance of evidence governance. Modern forensic laboratories operate within rigorous quality management systems designed to ensure consistency, accuracy, and transparency. Accreditation standards, validated analytical procedures, proficiency testing, and detailed documentation all contribute to maintaining confidence in forensic results. Historical investigations that eventually rely on decades-old evidence demonstrate why these standards are essential throughout the entire life cycle of a criminal case. Another lasting contribution of the investigation lies in its influence on professional training. Detectives, crime scene investigators, forensic scientists, and prosecutors frequently study historical cases to understand how investigative decisions made during the earliest stages may affect future opportunities. The preservation of physical evidence, careful documentation of investigative activity, and maintenance of an unbroken chain of custody are emphasized not merely as procedural requirements, but as essential components of long-term investigative success. Interagency cooperation, likewise, remains a central lesson. Complex criminal investigations often involve multiple organizations with distinct responsibilities, including local police, forensic laboratories, prosecutors, and, where appropriate, agencies from different jurisdictions. Effective communication, standardized documentation, and coordinated case management enable these organizations to work together efficiently while preserving investigative continuity across extended periods. The investigation further demonstrates the importance of adapting responsibly to technological change. As forensic methods continue to advance, agencies must carefully evaluate when new techniques are appropriate for historical evidence and ensure that any resulting conclusions satisfy accepted scientific and legal standards. Innovation is most effective when implemented within established investigative frameworks that prioritize accuracy, objectivity, and procedural fairness. For educators and researchers, the case remains a valuable example of how criminal investigations evolve over time. It illustrates the interaction between scientific progress, institutional memory, legal safeguards, and investigative persistence. Rather than viewing technology as a replacement for traditional detective work, the investigation demonstrates how modern forensic methods strengthen investigations when combined with careful evidence management and systematic investigative practice. Today, the Cook Van Queilenborg investigation continues to be referenced within forensic science, criminal justice, and law enforcement communities as an example of effective long-term investigative practice. Its enduring significance lies not only in its historical outcome, but also in the professional principles it reinforces. Preserve evidence carefully, document investigative actions thoroughly, embrace scientifically validated methods responsibly, and recognize that the pursuit of justice often extends across generations. Those lessons continue to inform contemporary investigative practice and will remain relevant as forensic science advances in the years ahead. The Cook Van Queilenborg investigation also serves as a reminder that every advancement in forensic science carries corresponding responsibilities. As investigative tools become more sophisticated, law enforcement agencies must ensure that new technologies are applied within established legal and scientific frameworks. Accuracy, transparency, and accountability remain fundamental principles, regardless of how powerful investigative methods become. One of the most significant developments in recent decades has been the growing emphasis on evidence stewardship. Modern investigative agencies increasingly recognize that evidence is not simply collected for immediate use, but preserved as a long-term scientific resource. Secure storage, environmental controls, comprehensive inventories, and digital tracking systems all contribute to maintaining the integrity of physical evidence over extended periods. Historical investigations have repeatedly demonstrated that evidence preserved carefully today may answer questions many years in the future. The investigation further illustrates the importance of continuous professional development. Detectives, forensic scientists, prosecutors, and crime scene specialists must regularly adapt to evolving scientific knowledge and legal standards. New laboratory techniques, revised forensic guidelines, and advances in analytical technology require ongoing education to ensure that investigative practices remain both scientifically reliable and legally defensible. This commitment to professional learning strengthens the overall quality of criminal investigations. Another important lesson concerns institutional resilience. Major investigations frequently extend beyond the careers of the individuals who initiated them. Agencies therefore depend upon structured record management, standardized investigative procedures, and effective knowledge transfer to preserve continuity across generations of personnel. Detailed case files, forensic reports, evidence logs, and investigative summaries become essential institutional resources that allow future investigators to build upon earlier work without compromising investigative integrity. The case also highlights the growing importance of collaboration between scientific disciplines. Contemporary criminal investigations often involve forensic biology, digital forensics, crime scene reconstruction, geographic analysis, legal review, and investigative coordination. Each discipline contributes distinct expertise while operating within a shared evidentiary framework. Effective collaboration enables investigators to evaluate complex cases from multiple perspectives while maintaining consistency throughout the investigative process. From a policy standpoint, historical investigations such as this have encouraged many jurisdictions to establish formal cold case review procedures. Rather than relying solely on new public information, agencies now evaluate whether preserved evidence should undergo renewed forensic examination as laboratory capabilities improve. These structured review programs help ensure that historical investigations continue to receive objective assessment based on evolving scientific opportunities rather than remaining permanently inactive. Academic researchers have likewise drawn valuable insights from the investigation. Studies examining the evolution of forensic science frequently reference long-term homicide investigations to demonstrate how technological progress interacts with evidence preservation, investigative methodology, and judicial procedure. Such research contributes to improving future investigative practices by identifying effective strategies while reinforcing the importance of scientific validation and procedural consistency. Ultimately, the enduring significance of the Cook van Quillenborg investigation lies in the professional standards it exemplifies. Careful evidence preservation, comprehensive documentation, interdisciplinary cooperation, ongoing scientific advancement, and sustained institutional commitment collectively created the conditions that allowed investigators to revisit a decades-old case with confidence in the integrity of the available evidence. These principles continue to shape modern homicide investigations and remain central to the responsible administration of criminal justice. As forensic science continues to evolve, future investigators will undoubtedly encounter technologies that are difficult to imagine today. Yet, regardless of those innovations, the foundations of effective criminal investigation are unlikely to change. Careful documentation, objective analysis, lawful investigative procedures, and respect for evidentiary integrity will remain essential to ensuring that scientific progress serves the pursuit of justice in a manner that is both reliable and fair.